Hi, this is Chris.
And this is Kevin.
You hear me all right?
I can hear you great.
All right. Let's get right into the video, man. I mean, Delin dropped another thing. It's just driving me crazy. I got to get right into it. Are you ready for this? Listen to this crap.
Like, can you believe all this racist stuff that Brad Wilcox has been saying, man? I mean, like for
Wait a
real.
minute. Did you say that somebody said something super racist in the Mormon church?
Yeah, for sure. Brad Wilcox has been real racist lately.
Oh, super. So it's super racist, and I could probably use it to exploit it?
Surely.
Wow, man. I mean, this Mormon story stuff is going, man, they're going bonkers. They're still rolling with the telethon, dude. I can't believe how much they're getting out of it. You're doing some good work there, exposing the super duper racism. You know who else is exposing that super duper racism? It's
Is it Project Veritas?
It's BYU itself. What did they say here? Let's see.
We are deeply concerned with the words recently used by Dr. Brad Wilcox. BYU leaders said, "We appreciate his sincere apology and believe he is committed to learn from this experience. BYU remains committed to upholding President Nelson's charge to root out racism in our institutions. We are carrying out the guiding principles outlined by President Worthen in evaluating and implementing and recommendations provided by the Committee on Race, Equity, and Belonging, including the creation of a new Office of Belonging." I thought Cwic was saying something about them like not using the word equity, but they keep slipping it in.
They said they weren't going to, or he said they shouldn't?
I think that he covered this a little bit ago. They were trying to push it more toward just focusing on the race, but like the whole equity thing, like.
I guess we should say what it is. I mean, people probably turning into this already know what it is, but Brad Wilcox said a naughty race thing. Brad Wilcox is, what is he? I keep forgetting what he is.
He's in the Young Men's General Presidency of the church.
Okie dokie. And so he gave a speech at like a tri-stake thing that usually isn't televised to the whole world. And he tried to give an explanation for why black people didn't get the priesthood for the first 100 or so years in Mormonism. And his explanation was, well, it wasn't really an explanation. It was more just, well, the question is, why didn't anybody, well, he said it, why didn't the whites get it until 1829 either?
Have you seen a picture of the Young Men's General Presidency?
No. Should I pull it up? Really?
Yes, sir.
I didn't even know that. Who's the president of it? Brad? I had no idea. That actually kind of blows my mind. So in the Young Men's General Presidency, where this guy spoke of, one of the three of them is a black man. I had no clue. If you're not seeing the screen, that's pretty shocking to me. I had no idea.
Jonathan Schleicher put up. He's got some videos on Brother Corbett. Brother Corbett's in the presidency as well.
All of this is in the midst of the Joe Rogan situation and a bunch of other people screaming racism all over the United States, which I like to think this week is a little bit of a different week, but it's probably not. Probably every single week has all this stuff going on. Right around now, the Whoopi Goldberg thing happened, and I kind of wanted to go into that more on some other occasion, but I don't have any clips of it.
I forgot about that since it got swept under the rug.
Well, one of the things about that maybe people don't understand is that Whoopi Goldberg was actually saying things that are in line with critical race theory. You know, about, if you think about, it's so bad that Brad Wilcox is saying like, well, that wasn't about race. Well, Whoopi Goldberg was just saying something that was about race. I mean, I guess she got canceled herself for saying something wasn't about race that was. Yeah. This is just a quick link going back to the video Flip and I did yesterday. I'm not going to show very much of it, but I wanted to show it as a good debate for people to watch on critical race theory that has actual justice warrior in it who we had on yesterday. One of the things I said about this debate is on one side of it, well, you have the two apologists for critical race theory over here. And then on the other side, you have James and Sean. It's Sean Fitzgerald. I don't know why I forgot his last name yesterday. One of the things that I noticed about this whole debate, and it's something that always happens, and it's a little bit something that happened between me arguing with somebody after we put out that video, is that critical race theory and the more lefty liberalism arguments are two different things. And in this debate, Sean kind of tries to keep it in that classical liberalism debate because he has all the arguments against that stuff. He has the arguments. So the way I say it is we always talk about the Mott and Bailey, and the Mott is the defensible position, the one that you can kind of say, well, we're still using data, we're still looking at the stats. We're not. There actually is evidence required in this stuff. And the Bailey, which is the area of the castle where you go to fight more but is less defensible. The Bailey is critical race theory one, which is just no evidence, no data, no stats, no anything. And so this whole debate's worth watching, but it gets kind of confused as all these debates get. The same thing happened when Michaela Peterson put up a point counterpoint thing where Vaush keeps coming in and trying to speak for critical race theory when Vaush hasn't read an ounce of critical race theory. It keeps getting into these areas where this guy's ready to argue the same old kind of liberalism arguments of should we change policing? Should we look at these stats? Should we look at these sort of issues? And that sort of debate is happening within the realm where data can be looked at. And that world still has some problems. There's still some data that people will scream, oh, we can't look at that data because that's racist or something like that. But they're still at least looking at some data. Whereas the critical race theory is just what we say, our lived experience, our standpoint epistemology is just the truth, and you're racist if you try to challenge it at all. So it gets a little bit confusing in these debates because James will read the stuff right out of critical race theory. Mm-hmm. He's reading the Bailey arguments. And Sean, he wants to kind of get into the Mott arguments too. Like, I will attack the Mott and you'll attack the Bailey. Mm-hmm. The problem is the other two guys, and this is all that ever happens in these debates, these two guys only know the Mott. Does that make sense? Like, they don't even know the critical race theory side of stuff. They don't even understand standpoint epistemology. They don't even understand the way that they called it data justice. This guy's called Jangles. He's kind of a constant guy. It's kind of funny because you only have these guys who are internet debate bros who are willing to step up to the plate to debate these things. Yeah. Because the actual critical race theorists, I could show like this debate with this other dude. It'd be hard for me to look up real fast where you can see what it's like where somebody actually tries to talk with critical race theorists. And the whole entire thing is a setup of you're either going to believe every single thing that we say to you from the start, or we're not having this conversation. And that conversation ends because the guy very politely says, I don't know, maybe. And they say, nope, then we're not doing this. We're not doing this. And they just shut off the stream. Yeah. That was maybe I'll find it and put it in the comments. Maybe I'll find it in a second or something. But anytime you see these debates, you got these guys over here who kind of like are arguing like a liberalism point, which is still kind of in the world of data, even though they do their own junk with that. And Sean is very, very ready to argue with those types of claims about criminal theory and the ideas that maybe are like the age-old debates that we had all the way up through the 90s and 2000s. The new critical race theory debates are a whole different thing, and these guys just don't even know what it is. Right. So listen to this debate to get and understand that point. Vaush, when he went on the Michaela Peterson thing, he says, well, critical race theory isn't so bad. Actually, what it is, translate it all to liberalese, translate it all to liberalese, translate it all to liberalese. You know, he's given his own opinion on race and crime, not the critical race theory opinion on race and crime. Whereas James Lindsay on the Michaela Peterson actually has read the critical race theory and says what it is and what they're pushing and what aspects of it they're pushing into schools. Right, exactly. It's so dumb because like they always say that point, like it's not taught in schools. Well, guess what else wasn't ever taught in schools? The Civil Rights Act of 64. Right. You know, nobody ever sat down and said, this is Title VII kids of the Civil Rights Act of 64, and this is Title VI kids of the Civil Rights Act of 64. It's such a dumb argument. We taught the Civil Rights Act of 64 in schools back in liberal school times because it was just things that you put into the curriculum, general ideas. And the general ideas of critical race practice is getting put into the schools. One of the things I like to ask is like, all right, go say, because the same stuff will like pop up on Nickelodeon, you know, and you'll say, well, what do you guys think about the concept of colorblind liberalism? And they'll already have some predisposed thing like colorblind liberalism is evil. And you're like, when did you download that? When did that download into your brain? Was that there in 2010? When did you all of a sudden get these new ideas? How did they get into you? I have a friend of mine who is a critical race theorist through and through. He learned it all through ESPN. You know, he learned it all from watching the NBA. And there was even like this article that Kyle Korver from the Utah Jazz put out a while back about privilege.
Tomorrow at the Super Bowl.
What?
Said I'm excited for all the critical race lessons tomorrow that we get.
Yeah, it'll be all through the ads and all that sorts of stuff, but it's right through like the ESPN commentators and has been for a long time. That's one of the reasons like Clay Travis has picked up, because people got sick of that, or Jason Whitlock. But so Kyle Korver wrote this whole paper about privilege, and the paper might as well have been the original paper by Peggy McIntosh from the 1980s, which you should learn about that lady, the billionaire family type lady who came up with the whole concept of privilege. He came and wrote this thing about having privilege in the NBA. And my friend brought this to me and he's like, look at this. Kyle Korver just cracked the code, man. He just found this. I'm like, dude, this is a 101 class on privilege that every single kid in college is being put through. And Korver probably had somebody write this for him. But you're getting your critical race theory 101 from Kyle Korver of the Utah Jazz on ESPN. People pretending like that stuff's not getting passed on.
Yeah.
So that's actually just kind of jagging the yesterday, although all this kind of connects into today. I'm going to show one little clip real quick, real short, of something I was just watching a minute ago. Just listen to a couple seconds of this. Coleman Hughes talking about when he evaluates something a person says.
I mean, listen, my philosophy of communication is that I'm never going to ignore what a person is trying to say, or what a person means by what they say. They're trying to communicate.
Even if they communicate it clumsily.
Yeah. I mean, if you were like, how would you approach talking to a friend, right? If they were communicating something clumsily, you would try to get to the core of what they're saying, right? That's common sense. And
so that's me appropriating a blackface to make a point. I'm a racist. Let me just show this other article you sent me. This is another article Kevin sent me because it's the biggest old deal on planet Earth. Well, in Utahdom, in Mormondom. More videos released of the Elias Preacher that are making controversial race statements. This is something Mormon Stories already found and poked it and said that it's something he'd been repeating for a while. I don't mean to be a little oversimplistic, but sometimes I just think that we make things too complicated. Why didn't the blacks get the priesthood until 1978? What's up with that, Brother Wilcox? What Latter-day Saints were prejudiced? What, Brigham Young was a jerk? I mean, you'll hear a lot of things, but maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe instead of asking why didn't the blacks get the priesthood until 78, we should be asking why didn't everybody else get it before 1829? I mean, why did they have to wait until... See, that one's worded how I said it might have been better worded just yesterday.
Right,
because
yeah.
the one that went viral, he used the word white. Yeah.
It's a point, but it's still kind of like you're probably going to get to. Are you sure you're going to?
Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah.
But Cwic points out it's a little clumsy, for sure.
On Brad Wilcox talk in Alpine a few days ago, and I have to say, I support him because I've been there. I've actually, where things have sounded good in my head, and when I actually go and say it, it doesn't come out exactly as planned. But I think a lot of people are blowing this out of proportion or saying things that, that can be hurtful. And I know I don't personally know Brad Wilcox, but I know the spirit was there. And I've been in his situation where I've spoke publicly, and we plan to say things in our head, and when it comes out, it doesn't come out exactly as planned. So
his whole entire thing is that he thinks that maybe he misspoke.
Yeah, and he's giving him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
But if you read through all those comments underneath, no, it was planned. He's been giving.
I showed some of them.
Years and repeating it over and over and over again. And so I actually hopped in there and asked a couple people, can you show me evidence of him saying this over and over? And one gal was like, well, just go ahead and do a simple Google search back in 2000. Well, then that's where I found the KUTV article right there, and went in. I couldn't actually see another instance. There's another.
They have the second video. I don't know how old that was. I think it was just like a year ago or something.
Yeah, it's 2000.
Oh, that was a 2000 video?
Or no, sorry, 2020. So yes.
Oh.
A year and a half.
Yeah. So, and then supposedly John DeLynn says, and I have so many friends who could just tell me that he said the super racist thing, super like in the last super 4 or 5 years, super ago, and
really super damaging, really.
But that's just all he says is that he knows a bunch of people who said who'd heard it from him before, and they'd told him before to watch it, bucko. So this is Cwic.
A lot.
Yeah, we bring him up all the time, and we've never even actually shown anything that he talks about. I've talked to Cwic a little bit behind the scenes. Good dude. We went to the same mission area, and actually the whole entire thing of like where I once first appeared with Jonathan Streeter came from a video of Cwic got shared around ex-Mormon sites, and every single thing Cwic was saying in it about critical race theory was 100% true. This was already like who knows how long ago, but people already know more about it now. But at that time, it was just a year ago. It was still a little bit too obscure for people. Cwic was talking about it, at least in that video, and people shared it around, and everybody on the ex-Mormon side, look, this idiot is such an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And he was exactly right. Like everything he was saying was right on. And I said, no, he's right. He's saying it exactly right. And then I brought all these receipts, and then all these people said, what, are you a bot? Are you fake? Are you, and it just blew up in this whole entire thing. And Jonathan Streeter saw me arguing with the people and saw that I had some reading and some background and some understanding of the situation. And that's when he started talking with me. Cwic, I'd say, is like a super like liberal guy. He's like big, huge on Martin Luther King, and he's full of love and full of all sorts of stuff like that. And at the same time, fully aware that the critical race theory situation is a troubling situation, and the new cancel culture that does come out of that world is a problem. But he's also got more of a, even maybe you and I are a bit dismissive of it, and I think Cwic kind of warns off.
You can't just sweep that under the rug. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like he is sweeping it under the rug. It's not that it's racist, it's that it's dismissive. I'm sure that's the easy thing for him to do. He says he wants to oversimplify it. It sounds to me more like he's trying to make it easy. And it's not an easy issue. I'm going to show you why. The comparisons in using the Lord's timing with, okay, only the Levites had the priesthood for a long period of time. And that, the priesthood wasn't restored to Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery until 1829. Fine, but it's not complete. And you got to be complete. And I think that is the major problem here. I think that's where he lacks in the context of his comments. I do not think what he said was racist. I don't think it is malicious. I think it was insensitive, and I think it was dismissive.
So, I think this is great because I think Greg Cwic, he hits on. I think he's very measured, and he starts off talking about how it's kind of a nuanced opinion, and I agree with him. I agree with him 100%. I think that Brad Wilcox. I like Brad Wilcox. I've liked him for a long time, but he's kind of very typical LDS guy. You know what I mean? LDS leader, kind of John by the Way-esque. And I think that what he said, it was dismissive. It was. I think that he was trying to make a point. I think that it's kind of like I don't know. It was a little short-sighted. It wasn't, and I agree with Greg. I don't think that it was racist. I don't think. But here's the thing, when you look at how, and this is what you have to check, because if you're going by the woke definition of what's racist now, everybody's, the new edition of Newspeak has been put out. You know what I mean? Racist doesn't mean necessarily what we all thought it meant. 20 years ago. You highlighted with Flip last episode the new Newspeak definition.
The one that ADL had, but I mean that the ADL is just picking up on the one that I've heard people pumping out. I mean, I first started hearing it in college, and then the next thing I know, you got maybe some more radical types on Facebook pushing it, and being kind of shocked in around 2010 that people are actually believing it and buying that stuff, but you still just kind of think it's like a meme or something.
Right.
And then it just picks up more and more and more. Next thing you know, I got Mormon soccer moms saying it to me, and just watching like the slow takeover of the culture. But no, critical race theory is not being taught anywhere or pushed into anything.
Yeah, I saw they were putting out that documentary on CR.
Yeah, it was in the Megaplex theaters here in Utah.
Debuting like tonight.
Friday.
Oh, Friday.
Yeah, so my girlfriend shared this with me. I was just like sitting there, and she saw it on the television. She sent me a screenshot. I was like, look what's coming out. And it's expected to be released in Megaplex theaters at Gateway at 7 p.m. Friday. And then, of course, the news runs like a defense on it. Like,
right.
They're trying to scare people and create a boogeyman. What they are claiming is critical race theory is not critical race theory.
He's trying to conflate Marxism with critical race theory.
Which they do themselves in their very books. You know,
which is where it came from.
Yeah, which they themselves say is Marxist. Just read Kimberly Crenshaw's. I've got the book right out here somewhere, but
we're trying to say there's some sort of a link between the Frankfurt School and Marxism.
You don't have to read beyond like the first intro chapter of Kimberly Crenshaw's books. Like it's called The Critical Race Theory, the main writings of the movement. You know, and they say it right in there that they are, but. So why is everybody throwing this gaslighting about this stuff, huh? Because the deal with it in the past several years, it's been driving me crazy. That's it's been driving me crazy because I'll pull it up here in 1 second too before we get to the other thing. But so we're coming out with episode 2 with Jonathan Streeter talking about James Lindsay's and Helen Pluckrose's book about explaining at a high school level what all of these different theories are, cynical theories. For the past several years, I've been arguing with people that no, Jordan Peterson was not wrong in using the terminology postmodern neo-Marxist. It is what they are. They use postmodernism and they use a neo-Marxism, which is more of a Marxism where you swap out the economy and like the class struggle with like a race struggle or a gender struggle. And it's very obvious in their works and very obvious in the writings. And for so long, most of my Facebook arguments boiled down to getting people to admit what they are or what it is if they believed in it. And they would ultimately believe in it if they realized that you'd read enough of it. Some of them are coming online and realizing that game, there's this concept, it even comes from Derrida, called kettle logic. I'll pull that up. The kettle logic is this idea that Freud relates the story of a man who was accused by his neighbor of having returned a kettle in a damaged condition. And he argues 3 arguments. I returned that kettle undamaged. It was already damaged when we borrowed it. I had never borrowed that in the first place. And so he gives all 3 of those arguments at the same time. And it's ridiculous because you're just kind of throwing anything at the wall to kind of dodge getting stuck with what's just the actual truth of that you are what you are, or you did what you did, and you said what you said. And all of the critical race theory arguments dodging out of it is all kettle logic. It doesn't say that, and if it did say that, it's good. And if it did, and we should have more of it. But it's not there. But how dare you block it? It's not there. How dare you block it? And it's kettle logic. It's just endless amounts of it, and it drives me bananas. So I was listening to these guys criticize Peterson and Peterson on Jordan Peterson on his appearance on Joe Rogan. And these are 4 PhDs in philosophy, obviously smart guys. They obviously kind of know their stuff. And they're trying to, of course, zing Peterson. I listen to the whole entire thing, and they never really get around to zinging him. The best thing they get to is, there's always sorts of things like he says everything's found through, like the foundational text of Western culture is the Bible. And then they say, well, that's just a truism. We already knew that. Like, okay, but Peterson's there telling it to Rogan, you know. And that, well, the way he describes music, I can't believe he's describing music that way. That's how we obviously would have described it because we're smart enough for that, you know. And they just keep doing that again and again.
That's what they always want. They always want to say that, like, he's just all he does is say common sense things, you know,
things that you guys aren't passing along as PhD professors, and things that you're doing a crap job of doing, of igniting the excitement of young men somewhere, and he's getting out there and explaining it to them. But they ultimately admit to it right here. Listen to this.
It's because like a podcast on this, it's partially our own jouissance. We're jealous of the guy. We're jealous that he has his success. We're jealous that he has the audience. because we feel like
Not me. I don't need that.
Listen to this. This is for years. I argued, and I'm sure with people like this, maybe even was one of these guys, but I've come across hundreds of them because I've been in Twitter arguments, I've been in Facebook arguments, I've been in anonymous arguments on Reddit of saying Peterson is not wrong. There are postmodern neo-Marxists, and that's what they are. That's how you describe them. And for years, they're like, no. It's more complex than that. It's more difficult than that. I call it like Schrodinger's postmodern neo-Marxism, because if you agree with it, it exists. If you don't agree with it, you're a conspiracy theorist and you're crazy. You know?
Yeah, like it's like the homo structuralist.
I am the only postmodern neo-Marxist that I know of. And I have to be friends with you guys because that's what I'm. That's the pickings are slim.
Do you think Eric is a postmodern neo-Marxist too?
No.
Postmodern neo-Persian, maybe.
No, he's like a.
So it's they're admitting it's a thing. At least that's the first one I've ever even seen admit it's a thing and that he is one. You know, it's so mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
I'll edit that out down better to the exact clips, but they go through the whole thing, and then the only real thing that they get to, are like, I just can't believe him, is they finally get to him talking about trans stuff, and they say he's just, and they do the same thing that I mentioned on, you saw me mention on a Facebook thing today, that they say, how dare he get out of his field and talk about outside of his field and talk about things that he doesn't, he's not a super expert in postmodernism. How dare he talk about it? And then when he starts talking about the thing that he is a highly cited expert in, like personalities and psychology, and they immediately go, he's wrong on these things, you know, and so they're now the experts and hit the field that he's an expert in. And that's something you should watch for all the time. These people who want to say, how dare you talk outside of your field of expertise, but I'll tell you all in the world about your field of expertise, because it's fine for me, not for you. But on the same level, this stuff's been driving me crazy. It's the same with the Frankfurt School. If you agree with it, it totally exists and obviously exists and it easily exists. And it's just been something that's been very common as a part and is in all the writings of this stuff. If you disagree with it, you're a conspiracy theorist and it doesn't exist.
Right.
But it's weird to me that, like, in these weird little ways, some of these things are starting to get admitted to. I think it's Dawkins once said it's like trying to nail Jello to the wall, you know, trying to get them to admit what they are and what they're doing. Right. And I'll tell you right now, if they did just admit to what they are and what they're doing and what it all is, my respect level for them would just shoot up through the roof, even if they still held the same beliefs.
But it's, you know, the thing about it is it's like one of the greatest defenses, because here's the thing. Peterson, he named it. That's it. He named it. And we've learned that that's kind of like the thing that disarms it the most. Is that he named it, and everybody wants to say no, that's he who must not be named. You know, yeah. we can't call
like giving Voldemort a name. Yeah,
exactly. They're just mad because it may be an oversimplistic. It may be because that's the thing, is that postmodernism by nature is something that's very hard to define. But you can relegate it down to some of the core tenets of it, you know, and
well, partially because what it is you're naming this Hydra, you're naming this thing that has just kind of picked and chosen all the different things they could weaponize to dismantle and disassemble society as it is, because that's what they view they have to do. There's the Gramscian level of they think they need to do it culturally, and there's all the way back to just the economic level, the basic Marxist level. They think that we need to save us from capitalism.
Right.
This is something I sent to you. It's too long, Chris, to read all of it, but we're going to hit on some of the highlights. I think you just hit on one of the highlights. I don't know if you even knowingly did that. I saw this shared by Andrew Sullivan and his Lyons. Give him a subscribe. This was a really good article. It's a super long article, and this stuff isn't going to get any better. One of the white pills for me was seeing people starting to admit what they are and what they're doing. And I think James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose have done a great job of putting that out into the world of, like, you guys can't deny this anymore. You can't try to pretend it's not out there and doesn't exist. Then you have a lot of different Twitter people who are putting it out, and they're getting banned left and right now. There was a Critical Race Theories L's was a losses, was a Twitter channel, just got deleted and removed. Chalkboard Review, which was exposing when critical race theorists were talking about stuff behind the scenes from their they do their Zoom meetings and they publicize it, but they're public enough, and he'd expose their Zoom meetings of these different union teachers talking and speaking openly about putting in critical race theory type things. And I'm not saying this is happening in every district, but it's happening at some of the high enough districts and unions that it is trickling in. It has trickled into places like Utah. It might not be in Nebraska, but it's here in Utah. That's one of the reasons why that video or that movie was necessary here in Utah already. It hasn't overwhelmed and overtaken. It's just like the inklings of it are in everywhere. I think you've talked to me about the social and emotional training stuff, where is the new area where they try to.
That's a big push in the schools right now.
Yeah, and they seep it into that. Not all of it is that, but I'd say all of that is stupid because teachers shouldn't be trained in being psychologists.
James Lindsay puts out that it was the third installment of his groomer schools.
Yeah.
Little series, I guess.
Yeah, I did a series called Groomer Schools. Yeah.
Discourses, but that third one talks specifically. You should go and check that out if you haven't.
For sure.
So.
But this is like I said, it's a huge article, but the points are real and they're kind of unfortunate. But like I said, being named or starting to be named and people starting to understand what it is a big, interesting thing for me. But I hope it gets more. I mean, that's obviously why Jonathan Streeter and I and you and Flipper, we're all just trying to talk about it more because, like I've said 100 times before, is all I want. You have people who are authoritarians. What they want to do is censor from you information they don't want you to see, whether it's the CUF or whether it's critical race theory, whether it's under that stuff. What I want you to do is go and read the people I disagree with. If you like it, you can like it. I've been talking with some guys about postmodernism online. They like some of the stuff out of postmodernism. You saw me have a little bit of maybe you saw on that same thread about Jordan Peterson earlier, I had a little bit of a back and forth with a guy who likes postmodernism from a right-wing perspective. And some people like it from an artistic perspective and all that stuff. That's fine. Like if you read it and you like it and you can pull some ideas from it, that's fine. But that's me. My point is actually read the things that I'm not a big fan of. I just feel that if everybody read it, we'd be fine. The revolution right now, it's not over. It's just starting. It's popping up. But a lot of people said from the moment Biden got voted in that, well, this will get ameliorated. It'll chill out. It'll calm down.
Well, you listen to like Ben Shapiro and you listen to a lot of these, and this is kind of the point that he's making in the beginning is that like a lot of like people on the right are kind of like cooling down because they think that there's going to be this big red wave.
Mm-hmm.
But this guy, this
like that changes much.
red wave meaning more of like a conservative one, not the
not the Maoist. Although that's happening too, but we're getting two red waves. But there probably will be like a red wave of well, I think that's one of the things he talks about here is that the red wave could be worse. I mean, you'll get another great backlash from that. They'll use it as a reason to get double hyperbolic about stuff. But
and I mean, again, like the point that all these people here is made in this like very, very well. James Lindsay's really making the point. I mean, anybody out there is like it is religious. It is
it's the cultural religious level. It's the level of these people who think and want to catastrophize and make Brad Wilcox the biggest deal in the universe.
Right.
It's got to be changed. It's the Solzhenitsyn thing. It's the hearts of every single individual. And it doesn't matter if we get some rhino people added in for one half a semester of Biden or whatever you call like the 4 years. It's not going to change anything. Most of those Republicans just can get bought and sold as easily as anything. That's another thing he covers here. I remember a debate with James Lindsay and Jesse Singal about saying, well, when Biden comes, it'll just chill out. And you kind of get these things like, is it almost over? Is wokeness? Are we about to beat wokeness? And he's got a lot of these different points. You should read the whole entire article, go to the Substack, NS Lyons, but we'll just hit on some of the points. Mm-hmm. One does not simply walk away from religious beliefs.
The number two right there. This is, we've talked about grifting off the void. This is exactly that. Exactly.
Yeah. It's hard to fill in the void of meaning. People might think it's weird for me telling the Mormon Church to hold, as the internet way of saying hold, hold to your culture, hold to your beliefs, hold to it. Like don't go altering the main thing to this just because you think it's going to work or help you. Don't be dismissive, but don't sell yourself down the river. Don't, the Jordan Peterson rule. Don't say things that make you weak.
Yep. Yeah. The whole idea of the propaganda is to destabilize,
decenter, and that's what all the postmodernism is. Demoralize, decenter, just take it all down to dismantle everything.
Right.
And if you get in the Hegelian Marxian frame of that, utopia just comes out of that.
Right.
Now, to be more nuanced, the postmodernists supposedly never did the part of saying the utopia was going to come. I mean, they were just full nihilists, just tear it down.
Right.
Okay, they're so much better. But of course, them being Marxist or just disillusioned Marxists, tearing down, they still have that thing at the end that they think something's going to be filled with like a new and better future of ways. The four horsemen of meaning. This is the whole reason those guys who are jealous of Peterson is because you guys don't offer this. In fact, I've seen some of their other videos where they go into like depth about Lacan. If you read Lacan's like the opposite of Peterson. He's like, the way that you can evaluate your whole entire self is there's no you, there's nothing that's you. You're not going to be able to find a real you. And the only way you can find your real you is to have some traumatic experience, so traumatic that you lose yourself for a little bit and then you come out of it. And then maybe you can sort of remember that. But even then you won't even really remember what the real you is. They think that's going to like get a bunch of, I think it does. Lacan got popular enough that it did get enough of little young nihilists to say, "Whoa, yeah, super nihilist, man, yeah, I'm nothing and not going to be nothing, and everybody's nothing, and everybody's just a fake persona, and everybody's just a mask, and everybody, great, Well, that gets as popular as that gets, and Peterson gets as popular as he gets, and Pajau and all those guys who are in the field of meaning making right now. This is getting worse. We're all just profilicity. We're just internet people talking to internet people.
Yep. I think the thing that I'm noticing again is destabilization of individuals, and what's most destabilizing is breaking down things like the units that strengthen individuals, such as families.
Yeah.
One of the hallmarks of Marxism.
Yeah, the breaking down, and you got more of a manner of doing it nowadays. Now that everything's gone online and meta, and you can even say a bunch of the movements that have been done to remove us from meeting each other and being around each other in the meat body world play right into that perfectly.
For sure. What was one of the main objectives of Black Lives Matter before they took it off their website was to destabilize the nuclear family.
Well, and then there was a second level of that, the same way that Lenin used his Red Army, or the youth before they became the Red Army, was to cause a bunch of street violence of brick and mortar stores to make the brick and mortar stores untenable, to make the city a place that's no longer a gathering place. This is a criticism of my position, and I take it. Liberal, it might be an inevitable byproduct of liberal modernity. And this is the criticism that has even been leveled at Peterson. You've mentioned it before, that like it's even the criticism of those neo-reactionaries, those people who are kayfabing, doing religion again. But the concept is that one of the only ways that we can maybe all band together, maybe liberal modernity isn't a good way of banding together. Maybe it was always pre-modern type religions that was better at banding together.
Right.
And I've even thought about that myself a little bit, that one of the only ways that there have been some ethnic only religions, of course, but one of the only ways that ethnicity really gets transcended is through a religion. And in Mormon world, you went down to Mexico, Mormon world, and you met a Mormon in Mexico, and you had a ton in common with that person.
Right.
The information revolution is still reverberating. That's not going to stop. This one could be like a double-edged sword for people, but I mean,
we covered that pretty good.
But how much this stuff's going to change everything, we still don't know. We're still just in the beginning of it. Like this point right here, that the Gutenberg press changed things for like the next century, and we're still. Kevin and I didn't have the internet when we were little, and this is a way bigger revolution than that.
Oh yeah. I've sat and thought about it. We kind of talked about it. It's the whole panopticon thing, but it's like we've had like 6 or 7 or 8 Tower of Babel, towers of Babel like built, and the internet is one of them. And look what it's
nobody can talk to each other. Nobody can understand each other. No.
Our language, it's corrupting things, and we can't have meaningful discourse. We can't, the polarization, the meaning of words has been changing. For heaven's sakes, the whole pronouns thing is. I've sat and thought about that. It's like pronouns are such an important critical part and shortcut in conversation. As you showed me that the Lotus Eaters dropped the that the Biden administration put in. It's just like, I don't know, just the whole trans issue, the whole pronouns issue. It's like, it's just screwing up our language.
Yeah, for sure.
Kind of a big part.
Well, and then there's like even stuff that we don't even know what we're prepared for yet. Like I showed you that Mormon Stories is going to talk about transhumanism in Mormonism like in the next day or so.
This gets so good. It's I mean, these guys just keep going, man. I want them to start exploring like Satanism and stuff, episodes coming up.
Yeah, so this is it right here.
We need to give Satanism a chance.
An introduction to Mormon transhumanism. I'm interested to hear what that one's about.
Yep.
Anyway, back to the. So we're just in the beginning of finding out what this is going to do to all of us. Yep. There is no authority.
Yep.
Yeah, there's no one to turn to. There's nobody's going to get us out of us. It's in our own hearts, each one of us. Although Mormons, you have an authority to turn to if you can hold to it, and if they can hold to being strong against it. Somebody asked, like, would you ever join or rejoin the Mormon Church? And I'll be like, well, one of the biggest cases that will be made to me is if I see them stand up to this for real. Political parties can't choose their policies.
I'm getting worried about that, by the way, too.
Yeah.
I get worried about that often because it's like, I'm kind of with you, man. I'm kind of like, wait a second, are you guys going to stand up to this or what? And
well, if they fall to it, something else will come up. Like Peterson says about Joe Rogan, is Joe Rogan on Spotify or is Spotify on Joe Rogan? And I'll say that too. Maybe I can say it, maybe you can't, but Russell M. Nelson, are you on Mormonism or is Mormonism on you? And if you guys just keeps kowtowing to this stuff because you're playing to ESG scores or whatever, or your PR team's teaching you to do it. There was one point in time where maybe you needed PR teams for things like this Brad Wilcox situation. But I, as somebody who graduated in PR, and you want to know what I learned from my PR undergraduate? Apologize. That's literally what I learned. Apologize. All through the 2000s, it was like, we're just going to teach companies how to apologize. The way we do our get way out of this is apology. And that whole movement has backfired 1,000%. Like you've gotten there, you've done it, you've been through it. Everybody's figured out now that that's not quite the way right now. But like Peterson always said, don't apologize to a mob. Never apologize to a mob.
Right, exactly. Look at Rogan. I mean, look at Brad Wilcox. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Cwic covered that as well. That might have been something we could have hit on, but Cwic covered the whole apology, and he even himself said, I don't think that Brad Wilcox wrote this himself.
Yeah.
It always ends with I'm committed to doing better. My stomach turns every time I hear it, man.
It ends with the people that you were supposedly doing it for not accepting it all and just using it as a bludgeon and a proof of your guilt.
It's like, I'm gonna self-flagellate. I'm committed to doing better.
Yeah, it's just a proof of your guilt now.
Yep, exactly.
This is true too, and I knew this before Biden was getting voted in or whatever. James Lindsay had a great thing about it when he decided to vote for Donald Trump, which was just breaking ranks with the very smart people. Like, oh my gosh! And his point was the name of that podcast was Biden is not the room. Like Biden is ran by that Nassim Talib thing that doesn't take very many radicals to overtake.
Well, that's the whole thing that's the whole Bolsheviks. So the meaning of Bolshevik was the majority, and then there was the Mensheviks, which they termed as basically everybody else, and it was the opposite. It's like the Bolsheviks were actually the minority, but they called themselves the majority.
Yeah, it's a video by Zero Fox, but covers Nassim Taleb's book, which, well, let's look at it.
Acknowledged for some time in scientific disciplines. Nassim Taleb has also written about this in his latest book, Skin in the Game, and he refers to it as the minority rule. I will start with the basic premise from a scientific study and then move to specific examples in order to illustrate. In any given population, people can interact and share or spread opinions and ideas. We will say that some of the population holds opinion A, some of the population holds opinion B. Some of the population holds both opinion A and B. To begin, there's a final goal.
Wait a second. Why have they only polled women?
Population that is committed.
What's that?
Why have they only polled women?
To opinion A.
That's all it's at universities anymore.
Yeah.
In the study, each of the types of individuals would interact through a series of speaker-listener pairings. Those holding opinion A would effectively speak A to another holding other opinions. After the interaction, the listener may be influenced by the interaction and would now potentially carry a different opinion. The pair interactions would continue with the individuals switching between the speaker and the listener. And over time, either change occurs or the population would remain stable with different groups holding different opinions. The interesting aspect of this study shows that once a committed group enters, where they are not susceptible to having their opinion altered, it becomes a matter of time before the entire population holds that opinion. Most interesting is that when the population of the committed group reaches only 10%, the change to the entire population is incredibly fast. A small minority with a low tolerance for being open to change can have a rapid and sweeping impact on the entire population. Naturally, studies of this type can show theoretical examples of how ideas and opinions can be shared and altered over time. They assist in providing some explanatory power when populations are looked at. Nassim Taleb, in his book Skin in the Game, has a chapter dedicated to this phenomenon and provides some insight into how it works, some barriers for the spread of the minority rule, and some examples of the principle in action. A simple example of an asymmetry of choice can be with a family of 4 in choice of a car. Assume the family has one vehicle. It gets into an accident and a new one needs to be purchased. If in the family 3 members can drive a standard or automatic, but one can only drive automatic, then it is more likely than not that the family will purchase an automatic. They will.
This is literally one of the main reasons why you have only automatics now. Like, everybody stop and think, where's all the manual transmissions?
Cede to the will of the minority, as the others have a choice that one does not. Now, if the cost of the automatic far exceeds that of a standard car, or the person wishes to learn how to drive a standard, this impacts the cost of that decision. The minority rule applies where the cost is low. If the cost is too high, the majority will not change. Another example is with kosher drinks. Today, less than 2% of the population in the United States is Jewish, and about 80 to 85% of them do not strictly adhere to a kosher diet. The strict adherence to kosher dietary needs are very small. Most drinks sold throughout the United States, however, are kosher. In fact, as of 2014, 41% of all food and all beverages sold throughout the United States was kosher. This vast overrepresentation of kosher products.
You get the idea.
Well, I think that's a really important thing to point out, is that, again, kind of going back up, and it's the whole destabilization of the individual. If you're a strong individual, you know your opinions, you know what you think about things, and that's actually something that I'm working with my kids on, because I see this happening so much. That I talk to my kids about, look, you've got to know who you are. You've got to know what you think and what you believe. And if you know those things about yourself, then you're going to be okay. But that's what's happening. And I think that's a lot of what's going on with all of this, that people are persuaded by propaganda.
The Solomon Asch conformity experiment. In this experiment, it showed that you could take a group of stooges, like stooges were the fake contestants, and you can put like the innocent participant there, and you can show the lines in the class that A is obviously the longest line.
Yes. Yeah, so the Solomon Asch conformity experiment here, they were talking about bringing in a group of people. And it's kind of a loaded survey, right? So you have these stooges right here, and you'll have somebody who doesn't know, who's like a genuine participant, like a genuine participant in this, but these stooges have it like where they'll argue. In this situation, they were asking which is the longest line, and you'll get these stooges to basically say that, oh, B is the longest line, and with a pretty high percentage, the innocent participant would actually be persuaded on with a high percentage of like somewhere around 80%, something like that. I don't know exactly which one it is, but it was a high percentage that they would actually just go with what the crowd was going with.
75% conformed. And so you said you were teaching your kids that
oh yeah, one of the things that I really try to teach my kids is like, you got to know who you are. You've got to know your opinions. You've got to be able to think for yourself, and don't be afraid of thinking for yourself. I'm still susceptible to all that stuff too.
Well, everyone is a little bit. Yeah,
for sure. Especially in situations where you don't know. That's the thing. And I think that's one of the diabolical tenets of postmodernism, is that it's by nature so undefinable and things like that, to where people just kind of like, oh yeah, okay, I go along with it. It's going along with the crowd.
So I think that goes along with 7 and 8, that the parties choose the policies, or not the parties choose the policies, but like these very small percentages of people choose the parties as part of the zeitgeist. Everybody thought when Biden got in that this guy is going to be the same old traditional whatever centrist, and no, he gets jerked around by his about 10%-ish radical, very intolerant edge of his party. Majorities do not matter anymore. Same sort of concept. Personnel as policy is kind of part of it, but part of this is talking about that critical pedagogy, consciousness raising training, these types of things, the ways that they go and seep into colleges, to universities, to even K through 12 schools, to everything. They've been doing the long. Rudy Deutschke, he was a theorist who said back in the 50s or 60s something that they were going to work on a long march through the institutions, and they've done it. Like, this is a 50, 60, 70 year long project going on here. It's actually 100 years if you go back to Gramsci. And we're in the middle of that praxis. They're putting theory into practice for a long, slow, long haul, and they've largely overtaken it. And one of the main places they do it is HR departments, where I'm at. Like, how did I end up in HR when I got trained through all this stuff? I mean, that's not a coincidence. All the institutional high ground is still occupied. Not just the institutions and all that stuff, but you could say something like, I don't know, what's the word they use? Something like deep. Oh, what's the word they use for that? Oh, I didn't want to say the words together. Deep, and we'll get canceled, man. But it's in everything. It's in Woke Capital. Read Woke Inc. by that. I've showed the book before. It's at Hollywood. Not in everything, but most things. They've taken over most institutions. Long marches are long. This is, I guess I made the point earlier because he's kind of hitting them all. So I've already talked about that this stuff's been going on forever. He's talking about Marcuse. This started before Marcuse. Culture wars are generational wars, and the young are woke as hell. I've met some young dudes, young people who are totally cool and get it and who are getting sick of it. There's also always the hope that they will become rebels against what they got raised in. Everybody's a little bit of a rebel. Maybe they'll turn into rebels and say, hey, this stuff's some crap. But on average, yeah, well, the generation coming up is not brought up with the liberal mindset that we are or were at all.
No, and I think a lot of it is they're sometimes I look at some of my kids and they don't. It's apathy. Their big thing is apathy. It's like they don't. Honestly, I think I see a lot of this rising generation just being, they don't really care.
Yep. There's another guy called like the distributist. He talks about this concept of like, it's a little bit like that thing in Wall-E where people have been fat that they don't like have, not saying just fat, that their bones they have no bones anymore. And he says there's something about that culturally too. Like there's a little bit of a thing of like, we're not going to just suddenly get kids who haven't been raised inside of appreciating any sort of culture to all of a sudden appreciate the entirety of Shakespeare on the first read. That's almost kind of like making those Wall-E people stand up and do 1,000 jumping jacks. Or it's like making those Wall-E people bench press 200 pounds on their first try. Listen to Beethoven's Ninth and then you'll get it. You know, they've been eating only candy for so long.
Osteoporosis.
Yep. There's some scary numbers. 40% self-identify as LGBTQ. 51% believe gender binary is outdated. 41% support censorship of hate speech. 66 support shouting down speakers they consider offensive. 23 support using violence to silence such speakers. 61% have positive views of socialism. 70% think government should solve more problems. That comes from pedagogy. The youth are still coddled and mentally broken. We've talked about Jonathan Haidt and the coddling of the American mind many times. Read it. And this is also kind of harking back to some of the problems of being atomized in internet and profilicity and that sort of stuff. Elite overproduction is still in overdrive. This is a problem that we have. All these people getting these big dumb degrees for hundreds of thousands of dollars and getting miffed about it because there's no jobs for their $100,000 humanities degrees. And that is a bubble. It's a troublesome bubble. Yep. He's mentioned James Lindsay here. The children of the upper class bourgeois fake elites who find that they'll likely never be a part of the truly wealthy that they aspire to be, and they quickly become a breeding ground for ressentiment in society. I think we've talked about the Nietzschean ressentiment and, you know, the whole entire idea of there is a powder keg about training all these people. Like think about somebody like me, but I didn't get a job in the HR, and then I think, well, because I went to grad school and I was given these A's and I learned all this postmodernism, and me, like I didn't have debt from it. I paid for it. Like I worked through it. Like if I was somebody who was just sitting here on top of a mountain, didn't get in time to get like a job, sitting on a mountain of debt, I assume I'm the smartest person in the world because I got a bunch of dumb A's from this grad school, which I've said before, like I consider myself smart and all that too, but I think my grad school A's in those worlds were all just a conformity A's. You know, I don't think they say much of anything. And I'm sitting here just assuming that I'm just the smartest person in the world, and it's not reflecting in my paycheck. And on top of that, I'm in crazy massive debt. And on top of that, well, I guess socialism is the only answer, you know, because this is bullcrap. You have this ressentiment built up, and that is a powder keg. These are some of the stats that are scary about that.
Well, we can all be excited for the Great Reset.
Growth of JDs.
Wipe away all of our student loans.
Yeah. And there's that huge bubble of all the student loan stuff, and then the huge bubble that they didn't get the jobs, and there aren't the jobs there for them to go get coming out of those colleges that are pumping them out. We've had Mike Rowe trying to tell people like, hey, don't go to college, come become an electrician, because this isn't just like a problem of like those people's individual lives. It's a societal problem. Wokeness is still required by law. This is a little bit difficult of a case to make, but I suggest going and listening to Christopher Caldwell make the case. I think he makes it on the Hoover Institution's website or the Mises Institute. And this is another criticism against maybe me and my position, but one of the criticisms about it is like even the Civil Rights Act was going beyond the Constitution. And maybe it was needed, for sure it was needed because we didn't live up to the Constitution. But now that we've gotten to like a point where we've lived up to where we've made right on that for some time frame, maybe like affirmative action or something like that, things need to be rescinded back to the original Constitution that's just lived up to that all humans have human rights, because it was well written from the first start. It wasn't lived up to. Money is still power. This is woke Inc. Big time. There's still major money funneling through NGOs that use it, like I've talked about with people thinking like, even John Lynn, you know, he gets money because people get tax breaks by funneling money to him. Like so much of whatever you think is philanthropy, like the layperson's idea of what philanthropy is, or charity, or PR work, is just tax moving stuff, but it ends up just funneling tons of money to hyperactivists. Yep. Before George Floyd's death, Candid found that philanthropies provided $3.3 billion in racial equity funding for the 9 years of 2011-2019. Since then, Candid calculations revealed much higher totals for both 2020 and 2021. Grants of $12.7 billion. That's just there. And you and I have gone over before just how much their money is getting sent to like DEI officers and every single institution that's getting sent into major corporations. Every single college has 10 million a year spent on DEI stuff. The stuff's not going away.
Well, you got the ESGs. It's like the big stranglehold that these mentions BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street. You know, these guys are sort of like a lot of the big. Yeah, there it is right there.
That's the stuff that I'm saying is going to be the pressure on the Mormon Church, because they are part of. Go ahead.
What is the major objective of the church right now? See, this is where I've kind of been like, you know, their whole stance on the CUF and all that stuff and the injections and all that crap is that I think personally it's that they've got that ESG pressure because they need to be able to continue to fund the building of temples and the acquisition of land. That's a precarious place to be. That's the thing where I'm kind of like, man, what's going to happen? You know, because it's like
Kevin and I need to do whole entire episodes on this one, but this is another concept of that. Like, go to this Investopedia and read this concept of what institutional investing is and how ESG and those sorts of things are changing. And if you're holding money within these things, you are getting pressured. That's a million times the pressure of Mormon Stories podcasts on your head.
Well, this is why you're seeing all, because what's happened is that this is going lock stock like into like what Klaus Schwab has like been. Maybe I shouldn't have said his name. Great Reset book and that kind of stuff. Is that the whole? It's what's happened is with COVID, all these lockdowns, and what you've seen is that it's killed off the small businesses. I've kind of talked about this before. It's or at least greatly reduced that and polarized to the corporations. So all this stuff is that these corporations are, I mean, look at it, you know, I see all these businesses being built in my neighborhood and they're all chains. They're all big chains, you know what I mean? And then you look at all these big corporations, Coca-Cola, the NBA, you know, and Gillette, they're all putting out woke talking points, woke narratives. And it's like, why are they doing that? They're not doing that because they really believe it. They're doing that because that's the S in ESG.
Yeah, and there's another level of the way they're redistributing all of that and changing it around is it doesn't actually correlate to shopping from the bottom up anymore. It's a new way that money up at the top just gets regenerated and recreated through the top and through governmental organizations, and they have power. They have power as a community to kick out bad performers or people that they think aren't up to snuff within their portfolio systems. They have a way to make themselves illegally. This is John Stossel made a video about it that maybe I should pull up. I won't pull it up, but they can pretend in a way that they are majority holders of a type of stock, as if it were like being a majority holder of an organization, and they can do things to push out bad actors or bad performers from their major portfolios, like the church. Their money rides on how much they tap dance for these woke people. Read the book Woke Inc. About it. Glenn Beck has gone to that stuff too. People are, oh my gosh, Glenn Beck's on the money on this stuff. Sorry to tell you. The opposition is still only political. We already talked about that. Like, it's the dumb red wave of rhinos. Red is the Republican wave. You know, 10 senators and not 10 senators. They might get like flip 3, 4, 5. But even then, I mean, Trump maybe was trying to stand up to it. I think the only thing that Trump was majorly useful for, and I think you said this too, is it made them show their hand faster. You know, because they were doing the long march to the institutions. They were going slowly, but Trump coming in made them all go, and they got too overzealous and started showing exactly what their intentions were, probably faster than they wanted to. They probably wanted to slip all this in much more subtly. And so I appreciate Trump for that. And I appreciate that, because so many people, it's so hard to get them to stop and see this. And I was seeing it even myself, I waved it off in the 2000s. Maybe a couple years before Trump, I was starting to go, oh my goodness. And then Trump hit, and then luckily there was a woke lash. They got intense, they got crazy, they went, but at the same time too, is they made leaps and bounds with that woke lash. You know what I mean? Like, so Trump made them show their hand, but at the same time too, they also used it to make a major offensive on the culture. And they could, you get a red wave next year, You can say zippity doo. Well, the Republicans are always so weak-willed in everything that they do.
Yeah.
Almost kind of like how BYU kowtows. And the woke lash, I mean, they'll expose themselves more, but they'll also gain more ground. None of the levers of power have changed or will change hands. That's more of that stuff. What is it? The state, the deep something or other state. And the Leviathan has woken. That's more of the same sort of thing. The Thomas Hobbes Leviathan is that the whole concept is there's this whole structure of the state that's lumbering beneath the water, and sometimes you can only catch glimpses of it as its hump breaks the waves, and you see, oh my gosh, there's a giant Leviathan under there. And I like this, what he says about the Chinese Cultural Revolution. In this way, the woke revolution strikes me as similar to the Chinese Revolution, not just because of the similar ideological emphasis on the destruction of the four olds. Get rid of the old ideas, old culture, old habits, old customs, as many have now pointed out already. Rather, because at root, the Cultural Revolution was started by Mao as a way to leverage the blind ideology zealotry of the young and wage an intra-elite war on the political rivals within the Chinese Communist Party. The reason it's not like a Bolshevik uprising or something like that is because Stalin and Lenin really did kind of throw a revolution, or Castro and Che. They boosted out the other party. What Mao did was he created a revolution that kept himself in charge. And that's what's going on right here. That's what's going on with whatever elite class is trying to do stuff. It's like a fake revolution to ameliorate the people who are realizing they're getting screwed by these people, to then just do all the bidding for them.
Well, you see it with us. It's, they label everything whiteness.
Yeah.
And,
it seems to me that the woke revolution is co-opted by the elite.
For sure.
It's being painted to point not towards disillusion and lawless chaos forever, but towards a reordering that brings with it a great centralization and unification of power, with a revolution where the same people are still on top when it's over. What kind of revolution is that? And you see it going on right now in the convoy going on, and they're labeling that, the first workers' uprising, any sort of a Marxist has seen in their lifetimes, and they're squarely on the side of the bourgeoisie and the elite and the people that, you've tricked people into revolutioning, staying the same, being on the side of the this just talks about Kendi, who's proposed being like a permanent person who's able to come up with these workarounds to say that they're the ones who can come up and approve and oversee all laws, but through like these amendments, these anti-racism amendments.
Yeah, well, that's part of the depths of the state. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah. Some of the many explanations above for what continue to drive wokeness may seem contradictory, and perhaps some are. That's what a lot of it, and that's never a problem in Hegelianism. Contradictory things work perfectly well together. In fact, what this whole entire thing is, I suggest watching James Lindsay, who appeared on Glenn Beck this last week. But you can call this, like some people say, oh, commies, it's all the corporates doing it. It's all the corporations doing it. Fine. We'll use the word fascism. What fascism is the marriage of corporate and state. It is communism embedded with corporatism, or done through corporatism, because the corporate becomes more powerful and larger than the law.
It's not capitalism.
Yeah.
It is not capitalism.
It's also like a hydra. It has so many heads. It's difficult to kill. A lot of them attack from one angle, from another angle. They seem like two different things. Postmodernism is totally different than Frankfurt School. How can you say they're the same thing and they work together? You, Zizek, you're a postmodern neo-Marxist who totally follows all the postmodernists and a bunch of the Frankfurt Schoolers, and constantly talks about a Hegelian dialectic, marrying up two contradictory things. How can this be? How can this be? Hopefully now you won't be fooled. That's all I want. But the revolution ain't over.
Yeah. And, I think that is kind of like the chilling out, there's it's waves, man. In between every wave, you have kind of a flat spot.
Ebb and flow, ebb and flow, ebb and flow. Yep. And then when it comes back, there's another thing that you can crimp down. You can say, oh my gosh, this COVID thing's coming up. Wait and watch. that not just will be like some other new variant or something. There's going to be some cybersecurity attack or some. Now they're talking about Ukrainian-Russian war or something like that. And,
yeah. Well, people are tired of hearing all of the narrative on the coof. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so they'll shift it off to another thing, but I don't think they'll want to let that one go. They're going to want to try to.
No, it'll come back. But
it'll come back as a variant, or there will be another sort of, oh my gosh. I mean, Bill Gates is already hitting it. The measles or the mumps return or something like
There's going to be a different boogeyman that's going to come into play, but then another variant will come later down the road. You know what I mean?
Yep. And the very smart people will say, just stop and do everything they say, and they'll let us out of it. You know, we'll comply our way out of this, and we'll finish with a revolution that keeps all the elites in power and us in pure safety of no freedom to do anything ever.
Or there'll be another social upheaval, like another George Floyd type thing.
Yeah, it'll just, I mean, in Marxism, it's called mass lines, that you have this one go until it like loses its effectiveness, and you'll have this one go until it loses its effectiveness. You'll even cycle back to one of the other ones. So it's just like, here's this one, here's this one, here's this one, here's this one. And they're all kind of just constantly moving to, you need more government, and you need our help, and you need our saving grace, and you need our safety, and you need us, you need us, you need us, you need us. You're the ones making us have to need you. I think one of the funny things that I saw, if we start, Biden's making this big push that kids should start with the state since pre-K. And so like really quickly, what they would do is if kids were with the state from the age of 1 or 2, within a year or two, they'll say those kids would not be able to learn to walk or talk if it weren't for the state. That they pulled out 1-2 switcheroo on you the second they're in charge of it. It's what we're in, it's what we're doing. Anyway, let's circle it back to the Wilcox thing. The revolution ain't over. This is a struggle session for Brad Wilcox. Church, don't give into struggle sections. You can say amongst yourselves and your friends that yeah, it was a clumsy thing, and don't be dismissive of the feelings of Black people for sure, and inviting all that stuff, but don't give in to struggle sessions. Just like I said on yesterday, and it's in the title of the thing, critical race theory is calling everything racist until you control it. And that's what they're going to do to you. And that's what they're trying to do. And that's what they're going to do. And sure, you can rethink how you talk about or think and even feel bad about that sorts of stuff, but do it on your terms. Do it on your terms. Figure it out on your terms. Figure it out in your ways. Don't be struggle sessioned into it. That's part of cultural revolution. And Mormon stories, people who follow Mormon stories, ex-Mormons, stop being useful idiots. Stop being the Red Guard. Stop it.
Yep. No, I just think
for sure.
For sure, man.
Well, this thing is super racist, and we got them. Those super racist 50K followers. Yes.
Oh, for sure, John.
Yeah, 50K followers it's the best week we've had in a while. And the more church going down because we're gonna have to they're gonna have to sit in the corner with a dunce hat on, and with that dunce hat on, we're gonna say, "You're super racist. You're super racist. You're super racist," and they're gonna have to let me be the boss.
So problematic. So problematic.
Super racist. All right,
y'all.
I'll chop this up.
See you later.
Late.